Welcome to another edition of the Talking Heels podcast, powered to you by Delahanty Media. I'm your co-host, Nick Delahanty. To my right is none other than Jordan Falls. Jordan, how's it going?
Good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I think the excitement between the two of us is ready to burst, so we're going to get right to it. We have our special guest tonight. We are going to talk some UNC women's basketball, and who better to do it with than the voice of the Tar Heels, Mr. Matt Krause. Matt, thanks for joining us tonight.
Nick, Jordan, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate the invite and excited to talk some basketball. It's coming quickly.
Oh, it is, and we're excited. The schedule is now out. We're a couple of weeks away from tip-off, but before we get into this year's team, we want to rewind a little bit back to last year's squad, and not last year, the year before, Sweet 16 berth, a lot of expectations for Courtney Banghart's team. They didn't necessarily live up to them come tournament time. Give us your take on how the season went last year and kind of what you're looking for going into this year.
Yeah, last year was kind of a up and down experience. It started with those huge wins out in Oregon at the Phil Knight Invitational, being able to knock off Iowa State and Oregon out there. And then some inconsistent play right around the turn of the calendar and the start of ACC play. And it dug Carolina into a hole, starting 0-3 in conference play. But yet those were all close games, right? So it's not like there's enormous problems. It's just little things to fix here and there. Then the injury bug hit in February. If you remember, there was an 8-game win streak in there when the team seemed to really be clicking on all cylinders, and the injury bug showed up, and a lot of those close games all of a sudden tipped, the other direction. And that was certainly emphasized in the ACC tournament, the loss against Duke, and then the NCAAs against Ohio State.
Yeah, exactly right, Nick, Matt. And so basically, Courtney Banghart went out and hit the transfer portal pretty hard, trying to replace some losses to the portal and some graduates. So how does that help transition to this year and help the Tar Heels accomplish what they want to, which is obviously a deeper NCAA tournament run? And I think Courtney Banghart's goal is to host a NCAA tournament game in Carmichael.
Yeah, that has been the talking point for this program for a couple of years now. They thought that they might be in position to do it 2 years ago. You guys alluded to the Sweet 16 season. And then last year, the committee, they favored recency bias, the what have you done for me lately down the stretch. And that was one of Carolina's weaker points on what was a very strong resume. And that's what resulted in the 6th seed going to Columbus. And so definitely not a situation where the program is, in need of a total roster overhaul. But yes, you had some players leave and a great offseason in the transfer portal, great recruiting class that's brought in that I'm sure we'll get to talking about. And that's the focus this year, is find a way, because it's a whole lot easier to make that journey to the Final Four when you're starting out at home.
Yeah.
Now, go ahead, Jordan.
I think the biggest transfer addition has been Iowa State transfer Lexi Dornosky. What does she bring to this team, and what does Courtney Banghart expect the impact to be?
2-time Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year sounds pretty good, doesn't it? She is a player that is simultaneously going to provide the ability to be tenacious in on-ball defense. That is something that if fans have watched Carolina women's basketball over the last couple of years, especially last year, that is something Courtney Banghart hangs her hat on, is defense. Yeah, doesn't matter how you win, as long as you got more points than the other team. So sometimes you go into Cameron and you win 45-41 and you will like it. And it honestly, it's fun. But Lexi Donarski is another one of those massively talented defensive players, but she's also a very solid 3-point shooter. She will fill the void that Eva Hodgson has left following her graduation and the exhaustion of her eligibility. So it's kind of twofold. It's that 3-point threat to replace Hodgson while simultaneously contributing to the team's defense.
To kind of add to that defensive point, they did add transfer Maria Gokten as well. And as we know, very good shot blocker. What kind of dimension does that bring for Courtney Banghart's defense this year?
Yeah, Gakdang is a former All ACC freshman team pick, and I remember playing. It would have been her very first ACC game. It was up in Chestnut Hill against Carolina, December of 2021, and it was impressive and evident how she impacted the game right then and there. She is a physical inside force that you know this team has somewhat lacked in recent years. So it's the ability to contribute to that defense in the post, to be able to go 1v1 against some of the taller players in this conference, and also provide some more finishing ability around the rim. And so she's a proven commodity because we've seen her, up close and personal last couple of years.
Now, of course, the two that we already talked about are very notable transfers, but the one that really is intriguing to me is India Navarre coming from Stanford, Carolina prospect. She really didn't get much playing time at Stanford. Do you think that she's in line to make a big impact on this year's team? And if so, how?
I'll phrase it this way. She has the opportunity to earn an impact, and that's not anything specific to her. That's just the way that this team is going to look early on in the season, because there are 15 viable bodies to contribute on this team. And so players like a Navarre will be able to compete for minutes. There are minutes to be had, but there's also a finite number of minutes to be had. And so I believe that folks that play well through the preseason practices, and then some of those early season games, they will earn those minutes. And specifically for Navarre, she's an Apex native that went across the country to Stanford. Now that looks a little different now with Stanford jumping into the ACC next year. But at the time it was, she's, leaving Tobacco Road, if you will, to go play in the Pac-12. But she's a longer guard with the ability to score, kind of a 2 or 3 guard, and just a great depth piece who, like I said, will have the opportunity to earn some minutes.
Yeah, Matt. Well, speaking of opportunity to earn minutes, what about the incoming freshman class? What does their opportunity look like? Obviously, this team is very experienced and has depth, which I think this might be, in my opinion, maybe the deepest class or deepest team that Courtney Banghart has since stepping foot on campus way back in 2018. And so what does that look like? Obviously, the biggest name in the class is Sierra Toomey, but what's the rest of the class, and what's their opportunity to earn minutes, and how do they fit into this lineup?
Yeah, well, it's a very deep group, like you said, Jordan, and it's a group that is comprised of players that are going to help out at all the various position groups. You mentioned the name Sierra Toomey. She's one of the top 5 recruits in the nation. It's a very, very big recruiting get for her to come down from Pennsylvania and become part of this program in Chapel Hill. She's a 6'3" forward. She's going to be one of those post presences that'll go along with Berea Gakdang to provide some of that size that Carolina has lacked in recent years. And that's no slight at Anya Poole. She has a lot of great qualities as a basketball player, and she gets picked out as the player who was the starting number 5 player for Carolina. So Toomey is going to contribute there in the front court. You'd have to imagine as this season goes along, but it's also a group that contains a true ball handler in Renaya Kelly. No relation to Deja, by the way, two separate Kellys on this team. A all-state player out of Indiana in Layla Hull, who's a 6'1" guard. Hull is one of those bigger guards, kind of an Alyssa Usby type. You look around, you see Riley Grays, a 6'3" forward, another one of those size pieces for some front court depth right from the get-go. And so put all those 4 together, you've got contributions. And by the way, Sydney Barker, who could have been a low Division I, kind of a Division II player, had scholarship offers, turned those down to live out her dream of being a Tar Heel and join the team as a walk-on. So even more depth there.
Now, you touched on Deja Kelly and Alyssa Utsby a little bit. They're going into their senior year in Chapel Hill. What could Tar Heel fans expect from them? And is this a situation where the roster is so much deeper than in past years, where they might not be asked to carry so much load in terms of minutes?
You would hope that's the case early on in the season, especially when you've got, those games against the likes of Hampton or Elon or Western Carolina, are early on in the year, keeping those legs fresh. But those are two players that have continued to improve in their time at Carolina. They have gotten better as scorers, especially in Deja's case. Deja's leadership ability has increased greatly. I think she's going to continue to be the heart and soul of this team. Alyssa Usby is still a tremendous defensive piece. She's going to have another banner season as long as she can continue to stay healthy. Just got healthy at the end of last season. I mentioned the injury bug, and her absence through some of February was definitely impactful. But you're right in the sense that they don't have to carry as much of a load minutes wise early on. And so hopefully those bodies will be fresher down the stretch because they're still very, very key pieces.
Absolutely. Well, so we talked about the returners, we talked about the freshman class, transfer additions. In your opinion, what does this starting lineup look like? Do we have an idea of what the lineup looks like, other than we can kind of assume that Deja Kelly's going to start and Alyssa Usby's going to start, but outside that, what does that look like?
Yeah, like you said, you can pretty much write the two of them in pen. Beyond there, I think that it's a situation where the one guard, you could see Kayla McPherson, who really came on strong at the end of last year. Paulina Paris was very impactful as a freshman a year ago. She's going to be in the mix to make the start. You'll see times where Deja's got the ball in her hands as the one guard, even though that's not her natural position. She's much more of a talented two guard. So you could see some sort of combination therein. The three guard spots, probably Lexi Donarski, putting Alyssa Usby at the 4, even with all that depth in the front court. It's going to be a competition for some of those minutes and that starting opportunity. You would think Gak Dang will be in the mix. Anya Poole's an incumbent. She's going to have every right to continue her spot in the starting lineup. But there will be times where Alyssa can slide back to the 3. So what you're seeing is the first 5 that are out there, number 1, may not be the same each given night. It could change, game to game early on. And then as the season goes along as well. And also the 5 that start the game may not be the 5 that finish the game at all.
Absolutely.
Makes total sense. Now, let's go back to McPherson a minute. Last year, she came back from the injury. She was out for an extended period of time. Now, with a full year under her belt, would it be too optimistic to think that she could be a starter logging 25 to 30 minutes a game if needed?
I don't think that's overly optimistic. No, I don't think that she is going to come in immediately and have those minutes for her from the get-go. Like I said, I think there's a lot of earning minutes that has to go on, and that's a good position to be in. But McPherson's speed is so impressive. Her shot is just is pretty on the eye, if you know what I mean. She's got range, good with the ball in her hands, and if she can harness some of that speed and raw athleticism, I think that being a starter, playing upward of 20 minutes a game, up 25, 30, somewhere in there, it's very possible. We'll see.
Now, with different options to work with, is there such a thing as a bad thing to have too many options to work with?
I don't think so. Because with what I've seen from this team, the chemistry is really good. It's a group that seems to really enjoy being around one another, seems to all be kind of pulling on the same side of the rope, to use that figure of speech. So I think that it's a group where, yes, it's in a really good spot right now. The minutes have not been doled out yet, though, and you never quite know what's gonna happen when that occurs. But I think it's a group that enjoys being around each other, and it's a good thing right now to be 15 deep.
Now, you touched on Deja Kelly's leadership, and now her and Utsby are going to be the captains for this team. With a young group coming in and some new faces, what do they have to do in order to lead this team in the right direction?
I think, as simple as it sounds, it's keep being who they are. Deja, even the influx of talent around her, has continued to improve to become consistently one of the best players in the nation. Certainly the most reliable go-to scorer over the body of work of the entire season for the Tar Heels. And yes, there's a vocal element of leadership, but that's the area where Deja's been coming along. But the leading by example has been kind of part of her game, especially for the last couple of years, but really since day one.
Now we're looking at this year's schedule, and it's a gauntlet.
Yeah.
Carolina has a lot of tough games, especially in the non-conference. How is that going to help this year's team, especially like we talked about earlier, as they're trying to get that home game in Carmichael for the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I mean, every year the committee looks at the data in its own unique way. And so you can't necessarily take the trends from last year as this is exactly what's going to occur. But you look at Tennessee from last year, right? They played such a tough schedule early on. And even though they kind of stumbled down the stretch, I think they had 11 losses going into the NCAAs, they still got to host because of that strength of schedule. So Carolina's got the opportunity now. If the tournament bracket in the Thanksgiving event in Fort Myers breaks the right way, they're going to play Iowa in the championship game. We all know about Caitlin Clark and her scoring ability. South Carolina, granted, a very new look South Carolina team with a lot of new faces. They lost the entire starting lineup, but they'll come to Carmichael November 30th. UConn at a neutral site, neutral in name only. It's the Mohegan Sun, where the Carolina men have played a couple of times up in Connecticut. So it is in the Huskies' home state, but it's not technically their home court. And Oklahoma is a consistent tournament team too. So you look at that quartet. Kansas State is appeared in some of the early top 25s. That would be a potential opponent. Fort Myers as well. And some of the mid-majors were NCAA tournament teams a year ago, too. So the strength of schedule factor is certainly going to be there because you know what the ACC brings, especially for Carolina being geographically centered in the conference. You're playing Duke, you're playing State, playing Virginia Tech twice each. And so I was looking at the numbers and believe it's over a third of the 30-game schedule be against teams that were in the top 20 in the net last year. So again, that's last year's data, but still, it is a tough group. 3 of the 4 Final Four teams, throw in a couple more Elite 8 teams in Louisville and Miami. Hard to believe UConn doesn't classify as that Elite 8 team, but they were tripped up by Ohio State, just like the Tar Heels last year. So it's a tough schedule for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, of course, Jordan, go ahead. Yeah, it's on.
I was going to comment on the UConn thing, and yeah, it's shocking that they are not another Final Four team, but them playing in Mohegan Sun is kind of like the Tar Heels playing in Greensboro.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, looking at the schedule, we're going to put you on the spot. Is there a single game or set of games that you have circled on your calendar that you're excited about?
I would say probably the final back half of the ACC regular season. Well, if you want to look at it in 2 ways. Early on in the season, the 3-game stretch it would be 3 and 4 of Iowa, South Carolina, UConn. That's a stretch that you got to circle for sure because it's the first time in a long time that Carolina's played that many national games all bunched together. And then once you get into ACC play, I'm starting to get to this, the way that the schedule lays out, all the Virginia Tech, State, and Duke games, the home and aways, are all in the back half of ACC play. So February 1st onward, you're playing those 3 teams, 6 of your final 9 games in league action. Virginia Tech is coming to Carmichael on a Sunday. It's actually 18 hours after the men's game at home against Duke. So if you're coming into town for that Duke game, I think it's February 3rd, stick around. February 4th, noon, ESPN2. reigning ACC champs, will be in Carmichael. And then closing out the regular season against Duke this year, it's Carolina's turn to host because it's the opposite of the men, who's hosting that final regular season game. So that's another ESPN2 game, March 3rd at 3:30. So those couple of Sunday games guaranteed to draw really big crowds because Sunday games do, and the rivalries certainly help there. So that last 9 games of ACC play, good gracious, buckle up.
Yeah, absolutely. What about as far how important or how much emphasis do you think will be put on that non-conference stretch there? You talked about from Thanksgiving through that Jumpman Invitational against Oklahoma, where they face potentially Iowa and obviously UConn and Oklahoma. How much emphasis is put on that, or is it let's focus on ACC play and just try to get better in the non-conference?
I mean, you want to win every single game, right? But
course.
it's such a stretch where should Carolina go, let's say 2-2 or 1-3 or even 0-4, you don't act like the sky is falling because these are all quality teams. And all the wins you can get there are only going to bolster that strength of schedule. So it's an opportunity for the program to play on a national stage, which is really important in recruiting, to build for future success even beyond this highly anticipated upcoming year. And it'll do a lot of good for the strength of schedule for the tournament. But it is, in a sense, kind of playing with house money, if you will, especially for those 3 that would start it off, Iowa, South Carolina, UConn. Because if you win it, you start thinking big, 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 like 1 seed kind of big. But, if it doesn't go your way, you've got a ton of great learning experience for ACC play and the strength of schedule numbers.
Of course. And now looking at this team and what we know now on paper and what the schedule brings, what should the expectations be for this team? Is this an ACC championship caliber team? Should we be kind of pushing our expectations a little lower? What do you think here?
I think it is a team that is going to be in contention for an ACC regular season and tournament championship. It's a team that will be, again, in contention for a deep run come March. The pieces are all there, but the ACC is tough. We've talked about the non-conference schedule, how tough that is. And you're playing some of those elite teams again, potentially come March. So, you don't want to look at this team and say, okay, this is 2016 UConn, because it's not. But that being said, it is definitely, and we've alluded to this, I think the deepest and most talented team that Courtney Banghart has had. So contention for all those big things, ACC championship, deep NCAA run, and ideally a trip to Cleveland for the Final Four. But, we'll have to roll the balls out and see what happens.
Yeah, got to play the games.
Mm-hmm.
That is for sure. And of course, throughout the women's basketball season, we encourage everybody to listen to Matt Krause on the Tar Heels Radio Network. The voice of the UNC women's basketball program was kind enough to join us tonight and talk about the Lady Tar Heels. Matt, thank you so much again for joining us. It was a pleasure and best of luck this season.
Guys, I appreciate it. Good luck with the rest of your show. And thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, guys.
And that was Matt Krause, the voice of the UNC women's basketball program. Jordan, I don't know about you, but after talking to Matt, I'm a little more excited about basketball season almost here.
I can't wait. We've getting a little bit closer. Got the schedule out last night. Now we've talked to Matt about the roster. Let's roll the balls out. Let's play.
Absolutely. And nobody has more information on the UNC women's basketball program than Matt does, and he was kind enough to join us, so we thank him again. And that's going to wrap up another episode of the Talkin Heels podcast. Our first live guest. Who is going to be next? You'll have to wait and find out. Until next time, I'm Nick Delahanty. That guy right there is Jordan Falls. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you really soon. Go Heels.
Go Heels.